Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to 1636 Amsterdam, where the air smells like salted herring, damp wool, and wait, is that crushed tulip petals? Oh dear, you might want to hold onto your nightcap because in this economy, your pillow could be worth less than a single flower bulb. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is there. Is it midnight in Tokyo? Breakfast time in Boston? Let's make this a global sleepover. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your wooden clogs clatter against the wet cobblestones as you step off the merchant ship. The April drizzle makes everything shimmer, the gabled rooftops, the brass shop signs, and especially the puddles where you just accidentally stepped. Those clogs really don't have great traction. A passing fishmonger's cart splashes your stockings, but you barely notice because your eyes are locked on the spectacle across the canal. There, under a striped awning, men in ridiculous plumed hats are waving their arms like windmills in a storm. One holds up what looks like an onion, kissing it dramatically before passing it to a man who immediately stuffs it into his velvet purse like it's the last biscuit at tea time. This, my sleepy friend, is your first encounter with tulip mania. Fun historical fact: Amsterdam's population had recently doubled due to immigration, making it one of Europe's first true cosmopolitan cities. The less fun fact: all those new residents needed to use the same few public toilets along the canals. But I digress. Here's something they don't teach in history class. The most expensive tulips weren't solid colors, but broken varieties with flame-like streaks. We now know this was caused by a virus, but back then, pure magic. Some growers even sprinkled paint on bulbs to fake the effect. History's first documented case of financial fraud involving actual florists. Historians still argue whether people actually traded entire estates for bulbs or if that's an. The lingering chime of church bells still trembled in the damp air as you stood beneath the golden keg sign, watching raindrops trace winding tear tracks through the gilded paint. The gap-toothed merchant was late, or perhaps you'd arrived too early. The juniper-scented gin wafting from the tavern mingled with the odor of damp wood, reminding you of your grandfather's storeroom in childhood. While you wait, imagine this. In 1636 Amsterdam, people called tulip bulbs gold coins from the garden. And tonight we'll recount how these botanical ducats drove an entire nation to madness. An accountant in indigo robes bumped into you, the ledger in his arms tumbling into the mud. "Mind my figures," he shrieked, cradling the transaction-filled parchments like a baby. As you helped gather them, your eyes caught an entry: March 12th. One Viceroy bulb exchanged for canal-side townhouse plus annual beer supply. Fun fact: the most coveted tulip varieties bore theatrical names: Admiral van der Eyck, Semper Augustus, Governor's Pride. Historians note the more grandiose the name, the more outrageous the price. One variety was even called Solomon's Treasure, though it resembled nothing so much as a moldy onion. Academics still debate: was this bubble-free market inevitability, or did the Dutch contract a collective greed virus? Professor van der Linden of Utrecht University theorized it might relate to the newly popular telescopes, having seen Saturn's rings for the first tee. As you followed the gap-toothed merchant through the tavern's back door, the wooden floor creaked like the rickety ladders in your childhood barn. In the dim candlelight, a dozen men sat around a long table stained with beer spills that resembled maps, but what lay before them weren't tankards. Good heavens, it was rows upon rows of neatly arranged tulip bulbs, standing at attention like soldiers. Close your eyes and picture this scene. On February 3, 1637, at an auction in Haarlem, 99 rare tulip bulbs sold for 90,000 guilders, enough to buy the grandest canal-side townhouse in Amsterdam. Our story unfolds in that final mad winter before the crash. New blood. The gap-toothed merchant shoved you toward the table as all eyes hooked into you like fish hooks. A portly man in gold-rimmed spectacles pointed at you with a quill. "Do you know why Semper Augustus is so valuable? Because the flame patterns on its petals," his voice suddenly dropped to a whisper, "were painted by God's own lightning." Historical tidbit alert: the Dutch had truly invented air trading. Buyers and sellers exchanged mere slips of paper bearing variety names without ever seeing actual bulbs. Historians found that a merchant named Van der Vee made 5,500 guilders in 6 weeks trading these papers before jumping into his beloved tulip field on crash day. Scholars still debate: Did anyone recognize this as a bubble? An economics professor at Leiden University discovered an anonymous 1636 let. The screams in the tavern hadn't even subsided when the Swiss Admiral transfer document in your hand suddenly burned hot. Outside, the rain had inexplicably turned to snow, and Amsterdam's canals began to freeze. Just like the tulip market that had suddenly ground to a halt. Did you know? During this very snowstorm in February 1637, a florist named de Vries wrote in his diary, "The last tulip I sold today fetched only enough money for half a herring." 3 months earlier, the same flower could have bought a whole cartload of herring. The gold-spectacled man suddenly seized your wrist. "Young man, I'll give you 50 guilders for those 3 bulbs." His wig tilted to the side, revealing a patchy scalp. "Last week, these were worth 9,000 guilders," he said, but before you could respond, a sneering voice came from the corner. "I'll give you 5 guilders. And a pack of mouldy tobacco." Obscure fact, a bizarre legal document called the Tulip will emerged around this time. Some people actually wrote in their wills, "If I die, please use my tulip bulbs to pay for my funeral." Notaries later discovered those bulbs couldn't even buy the nails for a coffin. Utrecht University's archives show that the most dramatic crash happened on February 5th. That morning, the town square was packed with merchants waving contracts. By afternoon, the same spot had turned into a bonfire party where they burned their trading records. One baker even used a 6,000 guilder contract as wrapping pap. The chimes of the pawnshop clock struck 10 in the snowy night, your breath fogging up the shop window in hazy circles. Just as you were considering whether to trade those 3 Swiss admirals for a bundle of candles, a rustling sound came from behind. It was the newspaper boy, standing on tiptoe to post a new notice on the wall. Historical aside, this snow would last a full 2 weeks, until all of Amsterdam's canals froze solid enough for skating. The shrewd ice skate merchants became the only ones to profit from the crash. They repurposed the parchment from tulip trading ledgers into boot soles. The notice's ink was still wet. All tulip contracts hereby suspended pending review by parliamentary committee. The boy winked at you. "Mama says to buy bread after posting this. Flour's worth more than flowers now." As he scampered off, you noticed his boots were folded from ledger pages, faintly showing the words Semper Augustus, 4,000 guilders. Fun fact alert, a wave of anti-tulip cartoons emerged, depicting flowers devouring money pouches. The cruel irony. Those very cartoons were later used by fishmongers to wrap fried fish, whose prices were now soaring. At last, Amsterdam remembered that food mattered more than ornamental plants. An economic historian at Leiden University discovered that, 3 months post-crash, Dutch household accounts began recording tulip bulbs consumed as onions. One marginal note read, "Bitter taste, but better than an empty stomach." Aho! The docks before dawn were so quiet you could hear the water flowing beneath the ice. Crouching down, you used the plumpest Swiss Admiral to scratch a line on the frozen surface, only for the ice to suddenly crack in a spiderweb pattern, sending you scrambling back 3 steps in alarm. See, this is why we shouldn't doodle on frozen canals. Historical aside, on the morning of February 7, 1637, Haarlem's town square hosted history's most absurd auction. Bankrupt merchants sold their wigs, pocket watches, even false teeth, anything to buy passage out of Holland. Records show one man traded a silver snuff box for a loaf of bread, with tulip certificates worth 3,000 guilders still inside. The gold-spectacled man's map burned in your pocket. Pulling it out to examine by gaslight, you discovered the so-called Brazilian sugarcane plantation was actually mosquito-infested swampland, with a marginal note, "Investors advised to bring quinine." Suddenly, hammering echoed from a nearby warehouse. The gap-toothed merchant was nailing fragile, botanical specimens labels onto crates, though the gaps between planks unmistakably glinted with silver. Fun fact, post-crash, professional debt cosmetologists emerged, paid to alter ledger entries. Their signature move, changing gulden, guilders, to gans, geese, magically transforming debt, 1,000 guilders into debt, 1,000 geese. One notary recorded, "The sudden spike in goose prices has left the market utterly baffled." N.A. The musty air of the warehouse mingled with the briny tang of sea salt clinging to silver coins, making you sneeze. The gap-toothed merchant, now more fittingly called Goldtooth, was prying open another crate with his dagger, only 4 desiccated tulip bulbs to come rolling out. Historical aside, these were likely seed tulips, Records show merchants dumped unsold inventory into the ocean, where currents carried them to Norway shores. A Norwegian fisherman's 1637 log entry read, "Hauled up strange onions today, made soup that gave the whole village dreams of counting gold coins all night." Surprised? Gold tooth wrapped the crate. Last month these were currency, now they're ballast. He casually grabbed a handful of silver coins still clinging to dried tulip roots. Know what the Spanish call our tulip madness? La locura del tulipan, a disease even madmen would find insane. Fun fact alert: 3 months after the crash, Dutch hospitals recorded a new affliction, floral visions. Patients would suddenly point at empty air screaming, "Look at that priceless Semper Augustus." Doctors prescribed sniffing real onions 3 times daily as treatment. Professor Vandermeer of Leiden's Botanical Gardens noted a curious phenomenon. In spring 1637, Dutch tulips suddenly bloomed with extraordinary vibrancy. "Perhaps the earth mocks us," he wrote in a letter. "These flowers oblivious to what they've unleashed." This very manuscript was later used by his creditors as scrap paper. The lock on locker B12 had rusted shut, forcing you to turn the key 3 full rotations before it would budge. With a protesting creak, the door swung open, but instead of the expected silver coins or bulbs, what spilled forth was a stack of yellowed contracts. The topmost document bore a grotesque caricature in red ink, a tulip-shaped monster devouring miniature houses. Did you know? Come March 1637, Amsterdam saw the rise of a new profession, debt doodlers, artists who specialized in satirical cartoons on bankruptcy notices. One named Vittel allegedly bought a house with his earnings, using real currency. Flipping the contract over, you discovered it was a deed, 20 Admiral tulip bulbs in exchange for 1 Rotterdam harbour warehouse, dated precisely 1 week before the crash. A marginal note read, "Should the flowers wither, must the warehouse be returned?" Beneath, in different handwriting, "Certainly, just return the bulbs you've eaten first." Fun fact, the most coveted post-crash commodity turned out to be ledger correction fluid. Apothecaries simply relabeled their tulip salves and sold out instantly. Utrecht archives preserve one man's lament, "Spent my last 3 silvers on erasure fluid, turned out to be spiced vinegar. At least my accounts now smell like salad." Scholars still debate whether anyone predicted the collapse. Leiden University uncovered an anonymous December 1636 broadsheet titled "Tulips, God's Laxative for the Greedy," which was IRO. The harbour began to awaken in the morning mist. The fishermen's chants as they hauled in their nets startled the gulls perched atop little contract paper boats. You bent down and picked up one such boat, inscribed with the words "No roof, no home." A withered tulip petal clung to its hull, it crumbled into dust between your fingertips. Historical interlude. A court record from April 1637 recounts a judge who used a tulip contract as kindling to light his pipe, only to set his own wig on fire. In his ruling, he wrote, "As both plaintiff and defendant are as worthless as these ashes, this court is adjourned until currency regains its sanity. If such a day ever comes." From your black leather blacklist, a tavern receipt flutters out unexpectedly. On its back is a hasty doodle, a gold-toothed merchant drawn as a tulip-shaped vampire, sucking coins from a money pouch. Amusingly, the ink is thermochromic. When you breathe on it, the image shifts to show him handing out coins to beggars. In the corner, a note reads, "Perspective depends on your body heat and the warmth of your wallet." Trivia alert. After the crash, the most popular play was The Tulip Demon, which ran for 66 consecutive nights. All the props were made from real bankruptcy documents. The troupe's manager proudly wrote in his diary, "Audiences tore up contracts and tossed them like confetti. We saved on props and even earned cleaning fees." That very diary was later auctioned off as a prop. For 3 actual O. Crumbs from the bubble bread still cling to the corner of your lips as you stand before the Rotterdam warehouse once traded for tulips. Rusted iron doors are plastered with sealing notices, the latest one still wet with ink, "Seized for debt, Amsterdam Tulip Liability Clearance Bureau." A few wild tulips push through the cracks in the doorway, blooming in gaudy, vulgar reds. Historical pause. These wildflowers would later be called bankruptcy red. Their bulbs secrete a metal-corroding sap. A 1639 engineer's report noted, "Warehouse doors wrapped in them decay faster than the debt itself." You pull out the rusted key, only to find the keyhole already choked with plant roots. As you stoop to inspect it, a familiar cough crackles behind you. It's the newsboy again, now sporting an oversized tricorn hat. "Sir, care for today's news?" he asks, unfolding the Rotterdam Observer. The headline screams, "Tulip ghost sighted in warehouse district." The illustration shows a blurred silhouette under the moonlight, counting invisible flowers. Trivia time. 5 years after the crash, a self-proclaimed tulip king was imprisoned in a Dutch jail. He used breadcrumbs to sketch market graphs on the walls. A guard wrote, "He always spoke to the air, saying I grant you 3 acres of eternal Augustus," then tore strips from his uniform to issue contracts to the mice. These contracts were later auctioned to a medical institute researching mass hysteria. Leiden University Archives S. The dew on the warehouse roof dampens your collar as you lift a fallen, dried tulip petal into the morning light. To your astonishment, it's covered in minuscule figures, some kind of ledger. A breeze stirs, and the numbers lift from the petal like dust, scattering into the sunlight as golden specks. Historical interlude. In 1638, a bankrupt merchant published petal accounting, advocating for keeping financial records on actual flower petals. When the numbers vanish, at least beauty remains. Only 3 copies were sold. 2 were used by buyers to press dried flowers. Suddenly, the newsboy tugs your sleeve. "Mister, look at this." He pulls a sealed copper tube from the gutter. Inside is a scroll of waterproof vellum, an unfulfilled contract. Party A agrees to exchange all real estate holdings for 1 blooming bulb of the eternal Augustus owned by Party B. Delivery upon day of bloom. The signing date is February 27, 1637, 1 week after the crash. A margin note reads, "Both parties agree, if the flower does not bloom, the contract is void. P.S. It never will." Trivia alert. After the crash, a sect of tulip monks emerged in the Netherlands. They claimed the tulip bubble was divine punishment for greed. Clad in robes embroidered with wilted blooms, they chanted daily litanies about the vanity of value. Ironically, their garments became sought-after props, perfect for tragic plays, theatre troupes said. A diary held by Utrecht University recounts, "Today I married my dog." Twilight gilded the upside-down tulip embroidered in the frame with a faint golden edge. As you turned the frame, the threads, twisted from old contract paper, began to rustle softly. Upon closer inspection, each strand was inscribed with names, the so-called reliable buyers listed in the black ledger. The newsboy reached out and gently touched one of the names. Instantly, the thread crumbled into dust. Historical pause. In 1638, during Amsterdam's bankruptcy cleanup, a city clerk invented the automatic debt nullification ritual. Disputed contracts were placed on the plaza sundial, and whichever name the shadow touched was declared forgiven. Later, it was discovered the sundial had been tampered with to always point to the mayor's relatives. Suddenly, rhythmic tapping echoed from the attic floor. Pulling up a rotten plank revealed a hidden tin box filled with glass eyeballs, each one holding a unique tulip reflection in its iris. Etched into the base of the box were the words, "When all are blind, someone must remember the madness." Most curious of all, when you held one eye up to the moonlight, the flower inside would slowly bloom and wither in sync with your breathing. Fun fact, after the crash, Dutch opticians released tulip filters, lenses said to reveal true value. The advertisement read, "Through this lens you will see, 1. A child's smile equals priceless, 2. A tulip equals onion price." The church later banned them as tools of economic disruption. At the Leiden Botanical, you follow the direction of Tulip Avenue to the end of the pier, where moonlight scatters across the Black Sea like a path of flickering silver. Suddenly, the newsboy pulls the last copy of the Amsterdam Gazette from his pocket, folds it into a paper boat, and places it on the water. Strangely, the boat doesn't drift away but spins in place, as if something beneath the surface is glowing. Historical interlude. In 1639, a fisherman in the port of Rotterdam hauled up an iron chest filled with herring wrapped in tulip contracts. The port log noted, "These fish from 1636 are worth more than the paper they're wrapped in." The chest was later turned into the first public donation box, engraved with the words, "Save for the next bubble." You wade into the water to retrieve the glowing object. Your fingers touch a glass bottle, and inside it curls a crystal tulip. As you pull out the cork, the sea breeze carries a fragment of echoed conversation. "You're really trading your villa for this bottle." "Of course. When the bubble bursts, at least this will float." Upon closer inspection, each petal of the crystal flower is etched with miniature contract clauses, and nestled in the heart of the bloom is a single genuine tulip seed. Trivia alert: after the crash, a wave of bubble artists emerged in the Netherlands, turning bankruptcy documents into papier-mâché sculptures. The most famous piece, The Flower of Nothingness, was made from 3,000 tulip contracts. On the exhibition's open, the teardrop from the statue shattered into a burst of starlight upon the reef. As the tide receded, you suddenly noticed the beach was covered in evenly spaced indentations. Hundreds of tulip bulb molds, worn smooth by the sea, arranged in a massive spiral pattern. The newsboy knelt down to count 1, 2, 3. When he reached the 37th, his voice trembled. "That's my grandfather's brick factory mark." Historical interlude. In the autumn of 1637, a brickmaker in Amsterdam reportedly repurposed his bankrupt molds into children's toys. According to municipal records, these molds performed admirably in the sandcastle competition, especially for the financial ruins category. The winning entry was a miniature stock exchange built with tulip molds. When the tide washed it away, the crowd burst into applause. You picked up a mold still dusted with silver foil. When held to the moonlight, faint price curve engravings were visible on its inner surface. Stranger still, when the sea breeze blew through them, the molds emitted low tones like a pan flute. The newsboy clutched his ears. "It's the tulip elegy. Grandma said those who hear it will." Before he could finish, all the molds exploded simultaneously, not into shards, but into dry tulip pollen, which rose in the moonlight as a fleeting golden haze. Fun fact alert: after the crash, Dutch apothecaries began marketing tulip pollen as the key ingredient in a product called clarity powder. The slogan: "Inhale 4. 3 seeds rest in your palms, casting crescent-shaped shadows." Upon closer inspection, each bears a micro-engraving. The first shows a burning exchange, the second, a smiling farmer sowing seeds, the third, strangely, is blank. Suddenly, the newsboy sneezes, and the gust of air cracks the surface of the blank seed. Inside lies a smaller pearl, etched with a simple image of a balance scale. Final note in history. In the spring of 1640, rural churches in the Netherlands recorded a curious trend. Many confessed to planting tulips in vegetable gardens purely for their beauty. One priest noted, "The most sincere confession of the past 10 years." That autumn, Turkish merchants reported tulip orders from Holland had resumed, with a comment: "This time, payment is in coin, gold, not promises or dreams." Behind you, countless bubbles rise on the sea, forming the shape of a gigantic tulip before dissolving with the morning light. On the beach, a winding trail of water remains, like the final flat line of a price curve. The newsboy crouches, using a piece of broken mold to draw a crooked flower in the sand. "See? This way it won't burst." Final fun fact: the true legacy of the tulip bubble is the Dutch flower auction system. In 1641, a small town invented the descending price clock auction. Prices fall over time until someone shouts stop. The inventor said, "At least this way, everyone knows value is slipping away." The first item ever auctioned, a tulip, of course, sold for 1. At this very moment, the moonlight outside your window may be brushing your windowsill, just as the same moon gazed upon the canals of Amsterdam more than 3 centuries ago. Those wild, absurd, and bittersweet stories have all faded into nothing more than a breeze beside your pillow. Imagine those tulip seeds slumbering in the soil of time, their roots quietly entwining all memories of greed and dreams. When spring returns next year, perhaps new stems will break through the earth, but tonight, let them remain only a hazy, gentle backdrop in your dreams. Your breath slows. Fingers loosen. Even history itself curls softly beneath your blanket. The numbers, the contracts, the shouts and sighs are now as light as the final falling petal. Sleep well, dear friend. And know this: even the wildest bubble will one day become nothing more than a gentle ripple upon the sea. The end. Good night.